She gave birth to a monster and raised a tyrant. History is filled with monsters wearing crowns. But what creates a tyrant? Is evil born, or is it made? Today, we explore one of history's most chilling examples, a mother's love that created a monster, and a son who would become one of the most feared rulers the world has ever known. Our story begins in ancient Rome, in the year 15 AD, when Agrippina the Younger gave birth to a son she would name Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus. The world would later know him by another name, Nero, the emperor who would fiddle while Rome burned, who would murder his own mother, and whose name would become synonymous with cruelty and madness. But Nero wasn't born evil. He was made that way, shaped by a mother whose ambition knew no bounds, and whose love was twisted by power and revenge. Agrippina the Younger was no ordinary Roman woman. She was the daughter of a war hero, the sister of an emperor, and the wife of another. She had seen power up close, tasted its sweetness, and would do anything to possess it. From the moment Nero drew his first breath, Agrippina had plans for him. Grand, terrible plans. She didn't just want her son to survive, she wanted him to rule. And she was willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way, including her own family. When Nero was just 3 years old, his father died under mysterious circumstances. Some whispered it was poison. Others blamed a curse. But Agrippina didn't mourn for long. She had work to do. She needed to secure her son's future, and she knew exactly how to do it. Agrippina seduced and married her own uncle, Emperor Claudius, becoming Empress of Rome. But this wasn't just about love, or even lust. This was a calculated move in a deadly game of chess. She convinced Claudius to adopt Nero as his heir, pushing aside Claudius's own biological son, Britannicus. As Nero grew, so did his mother's influence over him. She didn't raise a child, she crafted a weapon. She taught him that power was everything, that mercy was weakness, and that family meant nothing if they stood between you and the throne. Nero's education was carefully controlled. Agrippina chose his tutors, monitored his friendships, and shaped every aspect of his worldview. She hired the philosopher Seneca to teach him, believing that a well-spoken tyrant was more dangerous than a crude one. How right she was. But Agrippina made one crucial mistake. She believed she could control the monster she was creating forever. She thought that her son would always need her, always defer to her wisdom and ambition. She was wrong. When Emperor Claudius began to have second thoughts about Nero's succession, favoring his biological son Britannicus instead, Agrippina acted swiftly and ruthlessly. In 54 AD, Claudius died suddenly after eating a plate of mushrooms. The official cause was food poisoning, but everyone knew the truth. Agrippina had murdered her own husband. At just 16 years old, Nero became Emperor of Rome, with his mother pulling the strings from behind the throne. For the first few years, this partnership of ambition worked. Nero appeared in public, gave speeches, and made decisions, while Agrippina whispered instructions in his ear. But power has a way of corrupting even the most carefully laid plans. As Nero grew older and more confident, he began to resent his mother's control. The student was surpassing the teacher, and the weapon was turning on its creator. The breaking point came when Nero fell in love with Poppaea Sabina, a beautiful and ambitious woman who saw Agrippina as an obstacle to her own rise to power. She whispered poison in Nero's ear, telling him that a true emperor shouldn't need his mother's permission to breathe. The relationship between mother and son deteriorated rapidly. Agrippina, who had sacrificed everything for power, watched helplessly as her creation slipped from her control. She had taught him too well. He had learned her lessons about power, about ruthlessness, about eliminating obstacles. Now she was the obstacle. What happened next shocked even the jaded citizens of Rome. In 59 AD, 5 years after becoming emperor, Nero ordered the murder of his own mother. The woman who had given him life, who had killed for him, who had shaped him into the monster he had become, was executed on her son's command. Agrippina's final words, as reported by the historian Tacitus, were chillingly prophetic. When the assassins came for her, she pointed to her womb and said, "Strike here, for this is what bore Nero." Even in death, she understood the terrible irony of her fate. With his mother gone, there was no one left to restrain the monster she had created. Nero's reign of terror truly began. He murdered his wife, his stepbrother, his advisors, and countless others. He performed on stage while his subjects starved. And yes, he really did play music while Rome burned, though it was probably a lyre, not a fiddle. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD became the symbol of Nero's madness. As flames consumed the city, Nero was more concerned with his artistic performance than with saving lives. Some historians believe he actually started the fire himself, clearing land for his golden palace. Nero's reign ended as violently as it had begun. Faced with rebellion and certain death, he committed suicide in 68 AD, allegedly saying, "What an artist dies with me." Even in his final moments, his narcissism shone through. So what can we learn from this tale of a mother's twisted love and a son's monstrous legacy? Perhaps that good intentions, when mixed with unchecked ambition, can create the very evil they sought to prevent. Agrippina wanted to protect her son and secure his future. Instead, she created one of history's greatest monsters. The story of Nero and Agrippina reminds us that tyrants aren't born in a vacuum. They're shaped by the people around them, by the lessons they're taught, and by the examples they follow. Sometimes the greatest evil comes not from hatred, but from love corrupted by power and ambition. In the end, Agrippina got exactly what she wanted. Her son became emperor. But as the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for. She gave birth to a monster, raised a tyrant, and paid the ultimate price for her ambition. History remembers them both, the mother who would stop at nothing for power, and the son who stopped at nothing to keep it. Their legacy serves as a warning across the centuries. Sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones we create ourselves.